Today, we are diving into a set of rules so complex, so controversial, that they've actually caused some of the world's biggest companies to walk away from the world's biggest customer. We are talking about the Cost Accounting Standards, or CAS.
I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, right? The US government is the single largest customer on the entire planet. And yet, huge companies, like Hewlett-Packard and parts of General Electric, have at times basically said, no thanks. The reason? Well, it all boils down to a special government-only accounting rulebook that can be unbelievably expensive and complicated to follow.
So what exactly is CAS? Well, let's put it simply. If you're a company and you want to do any significant amount of business with the government on a cost reimbursement basis, you can't just use your normal everyday accounting system. Nope. You have to follow these 19 very specific standards that tell you exactly how to measure, assign, and allocate every single cost. It's a completely separate financial rulebook just for government work. And that, right there, brings us to the central conflict of this whole thing. On one hand, CAS was created for a really good reason, to stop companies from overcharging the government and to protect our taxpayer money. But on the other hand, a lot of people argue that its complexity has created this massive wall, scaring away the very commercial and tech companies the government really needs to work with. To really get why these rules even exist, we gotta jump in a time machine and go back to the 1960s. Because before CAS, government contracting was, well, it was kind of a free-for-all when it came to accounting. A real Wild West. This timeline really shows you how the problem just kept getting worse. First, Congress tried to fix it with the Truth in Negotiations Act back in '62. But by '68, hearings made it clear that wasn't nearly enough. Companies were all using their own different accounting methods, which made it almost impossible to compare bids or figure out what anything actually cost. And that led to a major study by the GAO, which basically concluded, yep, we need one set of rules for everybody. It's not just possible, it's absolutely necessary. And I mean, this quote from a House committee report really just sums it all up. The fact that there was no common rulebook was costing the public a fortune and letting companies make huge profits, all on the taxpayer's dime. The government was trying to get a fair price, but it was like they were negotiating with one hand tied behind their back. So what kind of shenanigans were going on? Oh, the GAO found all sorts of things. You had companies double counting their costs, charging for something once as a direct expense, and then, hey, why not charge for it again as part of their overhead? They were hiding unallowable costs, things like lobbying or entertainment, deep inside these giant overhead pools. They were even shifting costs from their regular commercial business over to their government contracts. The whole system was being played, and Congress knew they had to do something to stop it. So CAS was born, the supposed cure for all this accounting chaos. But like any powerful medicine, it came with some pretty serious side effects, and it kicked off a huge debate that is literally still going on to this day. This testimony from United Technologies really gets to the heart of the complaint from industry. See, CAS doesn't just add a few extra rules, it often directly conflicts with the normal rules of accounting, what we call GAAP. This means companies have to maintain two completely separate accounting systems. It's a huge administrative headache, and the industry's point is, who do you think pays for all that extra work? It gets passed right back to the government and ultimately to the taxpayer. And look, this wasn't just a handful of companies complaining. A really powerful group of major commercial firms got together to form a coalition. We're talking about giants like IBM, 3M, and Honeywell. And their argument was that CAS was so burdensome, it was actually preventing them from bringing their best, most cutting-edge commercial technology to the government. But for every industry complaint, there was a powerful counterargument. You had taxpayer watchdog groups, like the Project on Government Oversight, pushing back hard. Their testimony basically said, look, we've heard all this before. These are the same arguments industry made back in the 1970s. From their point of view, CAS was, and still is, an absolutely vital protection against waste, fraud, and abuse. So here's where we stand. You've got these two completely opposite ways of looking at the same thing. Industry says CAS is an expensive roadblock that keeps the best innovators away from government work. On the other side, taxpayer advocates see it as this essential tool for fairness that stops companies from gaming the system. It's a classic battle between efficiency and accountability. This debate got so intense that Congress finally decided it had to find some kind of middle ground. So, in the late 90s, they asked the GAO to put together a special panel of experts from government, from industry, from the accounting world to take a hard look at the entire CAS system and recommend some changes. And this 1999 report is what they came up with. The panel's big goal was to figure out how to reduce the burden of CAS without making it weaker. So they held hearings, they surveyed companies, they crunched decades of data, all to try and find that sweet spot. So one of the panel's biggest recommendations was about this number, $7.5 million. They proposed raising what's called the trigger threshold. That means a company would only have to start worrying about CAS rules after it won a single qualifying contract worth at least this much. This was way higher than the old limit, and it was specifically designed to let smaller businesses and first-time contractors off the hook. But they didn't stop there. The next huge recommendation was this threshold, $50 million. The panel suggested that full CAS coverage, where all 19 of those complicated standards apply, should only kick in once a company had $50 million in total government contracts. So they were creating this tiered system, right? The more business you do with the government, the more rules you gotta follow. And here was the really brilliant part of the strategy. The panel figured out that these new, higher thresholds would dramatically slash the number of companies that had to deal with CAS regulations at all. But, and this is the crucial part, it would still keep 97% of all federal contract dollars under the protection of CAS. It was a really targeted way to ease the burden without losing oversight where all the big money was being spent. But even with all those smart reforms, that fundamental tension, the thing right at the heart of CAS, was never really put to rest. That debate between perfect accountability and maximum efficiency, it's still very much alive and well. So where does that all leave us today? Well, the two core arguments are still standing. Is CAS a necessary safeguard that protects our money and makes sure everyone plays fair? Or is it an outdated hurdle that stifles innovation by keeping the best commercial technology away from the government? The really tricky answer is, it's still kind of both. And that really leaves us with this huge essential question. Whenever the government partners up with private industry, you're always going to have this trade-off. Do you want a system that is perfectly accountable, even if it's slow and bureaucratic and complex? Or do you want one that's fast and innovative, even if it means you're accepting a little more risk? There really is no easy answer, and it's a challenge the government is still grappling with every single